Right, so 6.6 introduces us to simple interest. All right, and I think I talked to you yesterday about how simple interest really is a concept that grows the deeper you get into algebra, algebra 1, algebra 2, and your consumer maths. So as you move up, this formula expands, but on its most simple level, it is what? Can y'all say it with me? I equals PRT. I is interest, P is principal, your starting amount, R is your rate, and T is your time in years. All right, so I know we talked briefly about this yesterday as well, that years, that's important. So if it's 9 months, when I plug it into the formula, if I plug in a 9, my formula thinks it's 9 years. Okay, so I have to change the months. I have to divide it by 12, and we'll do that in a minute. Okay, so does everybody have their formula written down from yesterday? All right, we started that yesterday. Okay, so in example 1, we're finding a final balance. Okay, we have 2 scenarios. The first one is that we deposit $500 in a savings account that earns 3% simple annual interest per year, and they ask us what is the balance after 3 years. What is the balance after 3 years? All right, so what I do is I start with my formula. I always start with my formula. On all of these problems, I want to start with my formula. Okay? I equals PRT. And now I have to break down the problem. It doesn't specifically tell me which value these or which variable these values plug in for. But remember, your principal amount is your initial starting amount. So that would be 500, right? That's my starting amount. So 500 times my rate. But does anybody remember what you have to do to your rate before you can multiply it? Okay, so it's going to be 0.03 times my time, which is 3 years. Okay, so since I was given time in years, that's no big deal. I just plug it in. All right, so now I need to multiply 500 times 0.03 times 3. This is not something you have to show work for. You can just multiply it in your calculators. All right, what do I get when I multiply these values together? I get 45. But that is not the answer to my question. It said, what is the balance after 3 years? My $500 is still there. It just grew by $45, so I add them together to get my final balance. $545. Okay. So let's look at the second scenario. Now, given all the same information, what is my balance after only 9 months now? All right, well, we just talked a minute ago about the fact that 9 months, if I plug in a 9 into my formula, what does my formula think it is?
Years.
9 years, okay? So in order to make that clear and to actually get the correct calculation, I have to change it to years, and I can do that by dividing by how many? 12, okay? So if I can divide 9 divided by 12 evenly, if it changes to a decimal that terminates, I'm going to leave it a decimal. 9 divided by 12 is what? 0.75. So I'm going to leave it 0.75. If you're trying to convert 5 months or 2 months or 1 month, you're going to leave it a fraction if it ends up being a repeating decimal. Does that make sense? If it's a terminating decimal, use the decimal. But if it's a really long one, you know, like 5 divided by 12, then we're going to leave it a fraction in the formula. All right, so now that I have my value in years, now I can start plugging in my values. I equals, what was it? 500 times 0.03 times 0.75. All right, you go ahead and finish that now. All right, what did you get for interest?
500.
Yeah, and then what was your final balance? All right, good job, guys. Okay, so that's finding balance. Now in example 2, we're going to find the interest rate. Okay, so in each example, we're just looking at solving for a different part of this formula. All right, so I equals PRT is still my starting point. And now I need to just look at the values and try to figure out which value plugs in for which variable. If I could find it. Okay, I think it's this one. Is it, wait, did I just mess that up?
It's not showing. It's not showing.
Finding balance. Okay, it's that one. Okay, so you deposit $1,000 in an account. The account earns $100 simple annual interest in 4 years. What is the annual interest rate? So it's going to give you an indication in the question what you're solving for. On a quiz or a test, I'm not going to just write in the directions, find the interest rate or find the time. You have to be able to read the problem and know what it's asking you to solve for. So look for that question at the end of the problem to tell you that. All right, so I equals PRT. Okay, interest now is something I'm being told that it's $100 that I make. Make $100. I invested how much money? $1,000. I don't know my rate, and my time is what? 4 years. Okay, remember it's in years. All right, so here's where I need to use a little bit of the commutative property. Okay, this variable is right in the middle of my numbers. Well, commutative property says I can actually multiply in any order. So I do want to go ahead and multiply my outside terms together. Does everybody agree? It's principal times rate times time, right? They're all being multiplied together. All right, so what's 1,000 times 4?
4,000.
So now I have 100 equals 4,000 R. And I need to divide both sides by 4,000 to get R equals 0.025. Is this my answer as a rate, though? No, it is not. I must convert it to a percentage. 2.5%. 2.5%. All right, so here's our next one. Okay, you deposit $350 in an account, and the account earns $17.50 simple annual interest in 2.5 years. What is the annual interest rate? So again, I equals PRT. And interest, $17.50, equals my principal amount, $350, times 2.5 times R. Wait a second, I thought I was supposed to do R before T. Does it matter? No, commutative property says I can do it out of order, and I know I have to multiply those numbers together first. What's 2.5 times 350? Yep, 875. R. Now what do I do? Yes, that's correct. Divide both sides by 875. Oh, not 8.75. Goodness. Just 875. And R equals, which is 2%. All right, who got that one right? Who got that one right? All right, good. Good. All right, so that's rate. Guess what's coming next? Time. Time is next. A bank offers 3 savings accounts. And we actually need to look in our books. Oh, goodness, what page? It was 260. What was it, 261, I think? No, not 261, 267. 267. All right, look on page 267. For the annual interest rate, it gives us these blocks, all right, that we have to kind of make a quick interpretation based on how much is being invested. And a lot of times banks will do this. If I'm investing a certain amount, the more I invest, the better my interest rate is. Okay, so that can kind of serve as an incentive. So it offers 3 savings accounts. The simple annual interest rate is determined by the principal amount that you're investing. All right. So if I want to invest $800 and I earn $100 in interest, what would be my rate according to those blocks if I invest $800? Yes, it would be 2% because that's the 500 to 5,000 range. It would be 2%. That's exactly right. Okay, so So what I'm going to do now is just plug it into the formula. I equals PRT. I know that I made how much in interest? How much did I make in interest? $100. How much did I invest principal?
800.
800 times my rate, which we said was 2%. Wait a second, I thought it was 2%. Why did I plug in 0.02? Got to change it to a decimal times t. All right, so you go ahead and figure out how long, and I want you to write your answer in years and months. Years and months. All right, so when you multiplied, you got 0.0625. I'm sorry, 6.25. Goodness. All right, 6.25 years, right? 6.25 years. But if I wanted to express that in years and months and years, what would it be?
75 months.
Well, months and years. So 6 years.
Oh, it's 3 months.
Yes, very good. 6 years and 3 months. I basically meant instead of having the decimal, how many months is that? Like if you told someone, even if you told someone it's a fourth of a year, they'd have to think about it like, what does a fourth of a year mean? But now if you said half of a year, does pretty much everybody know half a year is 6 months? That's not uncommon to say they're 2.5 years old. If someone came up to me and said, "Oh, your daughter's so cute. How old is she?" and I said, 4.25 years. I mean, right? They would be like, she's so weird. Is she a math teacher or something, right? Okay, so, or even if I said 6.25 years, like that's not really how we talk in language. 6 years, 3 months, or you just kind of round it at that point. Okay, so it's just important that you understand the decimal value for years represents a certain number of months. Okay? All right, example 4 kind of puts things more into a real life scenario. If you borrow $600 to buy a violin and you're paying 15% interest over 2 years, you're not just paying back $600. Okay, that would be 0% interest. So you have to factor your monthly payments into the interest. Does that make sense? Or your interest into the monthly payments. So we have to figure out, well, first of all, before we can figure out our monthly payments, we have to figure out how much money we're paying in interest. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so if I want to find the interest, I go I equals PRT. What do I need to do to my rate? Change it to a decimal. Very good. Change it to a decimal, and when I multiply it, how much am I paying in interest over 2 years? I'm paying $100, $180. Then I add that back to my amount that I borrowed, and now I'm actually paying $780, okay, for that violin. Now that I know the total amount that I'm paying, I can divide it. Would I divide it by 2?
No, 24.
I'm paying it over 2 years, and I want to know the monthly payment. Monthly payment. So what would I divide it by? 2 years. 24. It's 2 years, so I would divide by 24. What if it was 3 years? What would I have divided by? 36. Okay. So when I divide by 24, what is my monthly payment? So if I pay exactly that amount every single month for 2 years, I'll pay my balance in full. All right, if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for section 6.6.